Welcome to Neurodivergent Faith, a podcast to help you navigate the beautiful and complicated intersection of neurodivergence and Christian faith and practice. Whether you're neurodivergent yourself, or you're a friend, family member, or church leader seeking to understand more about the neurodivergent Christian experience, you're in the right place. My name's Josh Davis. I'm autistic, ADHD, a spiritual director, and an ordained pastor, and I'm delighted to have you join me as we explore the unique ways neurodivergent people experience God, worship, community, and scripture, along with special interests, sensory and attention differences, social and communication challenges, and much more. Together, we'll break down barriers, confront misconceptions and assumptions, and celebrate the beautiful diversity of God's creation in all of us. So, if you're ready to think deeply and creatively, to reconcile your faith and your brain wiring, or you just want to hear what it sounds like when neurodivergence and Christianity have a conversation, come on in. It's a bit messy, definitely interesting, and we wouldn't have it any other way. We don't do small talk here, so let's jump into something real, raw, and robust. Are you ready? Take a deep breath, hold it, and let it out with a sigh. All right, here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Neurodivergent Faith. Today, we're going to jump into part 2 of my interview with John Machnee. He's the host of the podcast Christianity on the Spectrum, and John has done extensive research, gathering perspectives from over 26,000 Christian and ex-Christian autistics. And as we talk together, we acknowledge first and foremost that autism is incredibly heterogeneous. It shows up so many different ways in so many different autistic people. But there are some broad trends in what we are calling autistic Christianity. And in part 1, we talked about the trends of intellectual rigor, a willingness to take things to their most logical conclusion, challenges around language of having a personal relationship with Jesus. We talked about trends that autistic Christians move towards, such as systematizing, intellectualization, precision, and syncretism, this idea of combining things from different Christian traditions to form a bespoke theological belief that is my very own. I really resonate with that. And in this upcoming episode, we're going to talk about a few more things that autistic Christians tend to lean towards, and then some that we tend to lean away from. So thanks for joining us. Let's jump back into my conversation with John Machnee.
Another really big tendency is sort of a pragmatic literalism or straightforwardness to belief. Autistic theological thinking is often very just, well, it says this, so that's what it is. Uh, there are lots of cases where a lot of us go through a fundamentalist phase. And we go through the fundamentalist phase because that sort of literalistic thinking in fundamentalism is something that really appeals to us.
Yes.
And it's something I see all the time. Another really big tendency is hardlining. I joke that autistic people are sort of a bimodal distributed population because you rarely find us in the middle. We're usually on one end of the extreme poles. But there's also a sense in which autistic, like the next tendency is pragmatism. There's also a sense in which we are very pragmatic and have a very sort of do what makes sense attitude.
Right.
So one really good example of this is gender relations. So when autistic people think about gender, the primary mode that they think about gender is default meritocratic egalitarianism. So they sort of fall back to gender shouldn't be the deciding factor here. What should be decided is the person who's most qualified to do the thing. So can a woman do this? I don't know. Is she good at it or is she bad at it? And if she's bad at it, no. If she's good at it, yes. And that tends to be the lens through which autistic people will look at gender-based questions, which, often causes some tension within Christianity.
I think part of that is because some of the just cultural assumptions around gender just don't make sense when you take them all the way to the end of the line, like we're prone to do.
Yes.
And when you
Yeah.
look at them in other cultures as well, it's like, well, this is not a universal expression of gender. So how can it be tied to gender? And so then
Yeah.
you unpack and it gets really messy and people get their toes stepped on and lots of challenging conversations are had.
Yep, absolutely. Another tendency, which is sort of related to literalism and pragmatism, is simplicity. Autistic people, some of us will have incredibly complex theological beliefs, but the majority of us will develop a fairly simple, straightforward view of our theologies. In when you interview most of us, they will have a plain, straightforward understanding of things where there isn't much complication and nuance, mostly because we often can't handle that very well. And
Right.
so we,
Life is
you,
complicated enough as it is. Why do we need any more complication?
yeah, you think about a thing that gets brought up a lot is Martin Luther when he was arguing with the Calvinists, and he wrote in Latin, "This is my body," to tell people, like, when they were talking about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, is this just a memorial or is he actually there? And well, it says this is my body, so he's clearly there. That is a lot of the way that autistic people sort of interpret a lot of these things. God said it, I believe it, that settles it type of thing. Historicism is another really big one. So when you ask autistic people to think through a theological problem, they go into a sort of historical scholar mode where the way that they answer questions of incarnation or atonement or really anything with theology is to answer it as you're asking them a question about history. And so often everything is tied to the real events of what actually happened, that type of thing. And then finally, you get a tendency towards liturgy and repetition. Obviously, that one. Straightforward. Autistic people like routines. Autistic people like doing the same thing over and over and over again. So you get tendencies toward liturgy and repetition, tendencies towards sacramental theology,
Mhm.
like tendencies toward having a higher view of the sacraments, mostly because I think a lot of us, don't relate very well to the relational components of Christianity. And so the sacramental components of Christianity, which are sort of like these are God's promises to you. God said he would be there. He is there. That type of thing appeals to us. Having a thing you can touch and feel and look at and be like, okay, this is God here with us,
Yes.
has a certain appeal to autistics that they tend to get really into and emphasize. I found especially common in autistic women.
Hmm.
Another tendency is a tendency toward justice. Now, this one gets complicated because people hear justice and they think doing good things. And I always have to put on the brakes a bit and say, okay, it is a tendency towards justice, but what justice is heavily depends on who you are and where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
So, autistic people will be on the front lines of fighting for LGBT inclusion in the church. They will also be on the front lines of the anti-abortion protests.
Mhm.
Like you want to find autistic women? Go to a pro-life movement. They will be everywhere. You want to find autistic people, just go to an LGBT inclusion thing. The idea that our faith is supposed to be enacted towards the ends of justice is extremely common. But what justice means is heavily contingent on your prior political commitments and assumptions and moral frameworks and things like that. So justice doesn't mean a tendency toward being a good or moral person. It means a tendency to believe really strongly that you are correct
Mm,
and that you should follow those impulses to their logical conclusions in action and implementation in the world.
mm.
So yeah, that's sort of what the tendency towards looks like, and then there are tendencies away from anthropomorphization. So very little anthropomorphization in like attributing human characteristics to non-human things is something that you don't see a lot in autistic theological thinking. You get a tendency away from relational thinking. So relational thinking is sort of tied to the next one, which is emotional expression.
Right. Which I'm
Autistic people, tend to be very stoic. It's not that we don't have emotions, it's that just those aren't the thing that is what's mediating the interaction with the religion. And I describe like something I call the universal autistic experience. It's not actually universal, it's happened so much
Mhm.
that when I interview people, I have a checkbox for it,
Okay.
where the experience is you're at a worship night or something, and the praise and worship leader is at the front. He's like, I can feel the Holy Spirit moving, and you look around, and everyone in the crowd is just into it and moving with it. And you're sitting there like, what is wrong with everyone? Did someone spike the juice? And yeah, so that is an incredibly common experience that autistic people have. Another really interesting one is the tendency away from individualism.
Hmm.
Autistic people tend to emphasize corporateness of Christianity and Christianity as sort of solidarity with community, which is not something you would maybe expect if you read a description of what autism is because of all like the social issues and social difficulties. But autistic people often like really emphasize that a very big component of Christianity is not necessarily your own personal feelings, but your relation, your duties, your obligations to the other people around you and in your community. And that's a very big part. So individualistic ideals and individualism in theology tend to just not be there a whole lot within autistic Christians. Another one that you tend not to see a lot is sort of teleological reasoning,
Okay, I
which
don't know that
is
word. Teleological.
so teleological is teleology is like dealing with the end of time and like the end of all things and sort of seeing things on a meaningful, purposeful trajectory.
Okay.
So the example I often give of this is, you'll hear someone on a prayer request thing or a praise and Thanksgiving sharing session where they'll be like, I was almost late for work and I prayed to God, and then I hit every green light on the way, and I got to church or I got to work on time, and it wasn't late. And, I just saw God in my life. Autistic people tend not to see God in their life like that. Do we attribute meaning to sort of random events? The answer is no, not at all. It's sort of the exact opposite of that. Autistic people tend to be very skeptical of these types of things. And then the final tendency is the tendency away from abstraction. So the tendency to abstract things and pull them to a higher level to understand them, and to think about things in a non-concrete way. You see an anti-tendency, like a strong tendency against abstraction to be like, stop abstracting things. This tell me what the real thing is. And so that's basically what autistic Christians look like. Now, again, not every autistic Christian will be like that. Not every autistic Christian will resonate with that. But if you sort of give yourself on a scale of 0 to 10 for each one of the positives and add them together, and then 0 to 10 and subtract all the negatives and give yourself a score. Autistic people would be very far to the right of that axis, whereas most people would sort of be in the middle.
Yeah. even
But yeah,
hearing you talk about some of those things and just throwing them out and just briefly commenting on them. Stories from my own life are coming to my mind and reasons why I found it so difficult in church communities, for example, or in worship spaces. Why I've been jealous, partly jealous and partly like, if I'm honest, judgmental of those people who are praising God for all the green lights that got them to work. Jealous,
yeah,
like I would love to feel great about something like that,
yeah.
but
It sounds
how?
great to me.
How can you just attribute that to God and not even think about the consequences of that for everyone else who is driving on the road at the same time in different directions and whatnot? So,
Yeah,
John, my whole brain and body and heart are just like alive and have so many thoughts and so many things I'd like to explore. But I think for today's conversation, I'd like to ask you, what does integration look like to you? A lot of us, especially I think people who have grown up not diagnosed and not understanding the way that their brain was wired. We can get into these like compartments. I've got my faith life, and then I've got my autistic self, and I've got my Christian self, and they're different. What does integration look like from your perspective? What might wholeness sound like or feel like for an autistic follower of Jesus? And I know this is just your perspective, but is it informed by the data? Curious what you would say.
I would say I have no idea. Please let me know if you figure it out.
Okay.
The reality is like I personally just can't get past segmentation and sort of putting everything into different buckets and trying not to let the buckets interact or else they cause me issues. The I'm unfortunately really bad at compartmentalizing absolutely everything and trying to break things down into small boxes where I can sort things and and things like that. So I don't know if anyone listening has answers, please let me know because this is not a problem I've been able to solve.
I think this is a conversation that will be ongoing for all of us.
Yeah.
Even as you say that, I really appreciate your honesty. And you said you're bad at compartmentalizing. It sounds actually like you're quite good at it from my perspective.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I'm curious, do you have any either desire for more integration for yourself or even a conceptual idea like that would be a good thing?
I don't know personally. So it's sort of like asking a fish if they would like to try be out of water. Like this is
Yeah,
the only way that I've done things, and so I don't even like it's so hard for me to conceptualize what the alternative would be and what that alternative would look like and feel like that it's at or maybe a better comparison would be asking you to like imagine a color, a new color, right?
right.
And you're
I've
like,
tried to do that, by the way, and I have had no success.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like well, I can theoretically understand that there are potential new colors outside of like the visible light spectrum that are at different wavelengths, but what is that sort of experiential quality of feeling? I have no idea. So, so like, do I have a desire for that? Maybe. Like, maybe I'll try it and see if it works and see if it helps, but this far in my life, I have gotten where I've gotten by sort of doing the compartmentalized thing. Maybe it's because I worked in the fields that I worked, and in a lot of those fields, you really don't want to integrate what you're seeing with the rest of your life.
Right.
It's, like it. You when you do incident response or digital forensics and you're doing counter trafficking or like child exploitation investigations, you want to compartmentalize that far away from the rest of you. And there's only so many ISIS beheading videos you can watch before you start before you start being like, okay, I don't think I ever want to integrate this into my personality. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I also have those considerations that I have to take into account.
Yeah, it's protective. I get that.
Yeah.
Um, what about what would you say to some of the autistic people that you've interviewed and that you hold in your mind and in your data, um, who long for belonging but find traditional church systems draining, exhausting, frustrating, etc.? Fill in the blank. What practical shifts have you seen, or what might you propose that would help churches not just be neuro inclusive, but actually be more deeply mm, holistically connected? I don't even know what the term I'm
Yeah.
looking for is, but let's actually be interdependent and learn from one another and grow kind of.
Yeah, and I mean, we are nowhere close to that goal, unfortunately. As a church, like we are, that is like I don't know if I'll see that in my lifetime. And I'm pretty young. I'm in my early 30s. So maybe this is just like pessimism from years of doing research and trying to explain these things to churches. But right now, I think the biggest thing is just learning what's going on and getting language to describe what's going on. It's why I made the podcast that I made to just be like, look, I surveyed all these people. Here is what's typically going on in most people. This is how they're typically understanding things. This is how they are typically going through things. And these are all of the various pressure points and pain points that exist along the way. And I've had so many people. I mean, it feels good, but also feels depressing at the same time for guys to email me being like, I'm 56 and listening to your podcast for the first time, I was able to have the ability to express thoughts that I had never even thought I could have. And it's like, I'm so glad you got to do that. Super depressing that it took you 56 years old stumbling on a podcast to figure out those words. And so I think the biggest thing that we need to do right now is that sort of education component to realize a lot of people don't even realize that they're talking at on different levels, right? So we talk about the double empathy problem, and the double empathy problem is a useful conceptual model. It has some quirks it needs to work out, I'll say. And if you would like to know more about them, I've done some podcast episodes about the problem with the double empathy problem. But generally speaking, it is a useful overarching framework for understanding that autistic people tend to communicate differently than non-autistic people. And most non-autistic people aren't even aware that that's the thing.
Right.
Right. They aren't even aware that we're not always picking up what you're putting down. And then we need to subsequently also understand that they're probably also not picking up what we're putting down.
Right.
And understand this is a two-way street and we need to meet in the middle somewhere. But at the current moment, a lot of people don't even know that we're on a different side of the street.
Right.
And need to meet in the middle. And most of the time the burden is on the autistic person to walk to the other side of the street if they want to be included,
Right.
right? And the people on that side of the street in this metaphor, I don't know if we're straining it a little too far, but the people on that side of the street don't even know that you've walked over to them.
Right.
And
And that's so maddening because it took a
yeah,
lot of effort to even figure out that you were on different sides of the street and then to realize how you could walk across the street to get there. When you get there, they have no idea of the work it's taken for you and that
yeah,
you even did what you did.
yeah. And so like just before we can get to that point of integration, we have to realize that there's a problem, right?
Uh-huh.
And we have to realize that that problem has dimensions to it and it has complexities to it that need to be understood effectively before you can actually start to do it, right? Like before you start treating cancer in a patient, you definitely want to know what type of cancer it is so you don't bring out the wrong tools. Like, do you need to bring out a scalpel for this, or do you need to bring out radiation?
Right.
Like, what tool in your toolbox do you need to address this? And to answer that question, you need to know that one, there is a toolbox, two, that there is a problem, and and three, what that problem is and what it looks like. And so I mean, that's what you're trying to do with your podcast. That's what I'm trying to do with my podcast. That's what a bunch of other people are trying to do, like the Center for Autism and Theology are
Yes.
off on in Scotland trying to do something similar to what both you and I are doing. And so I think we need to get to that point where other people recognize that it's a problem, and then once they do, we can start moving forward. And I think, unfortunately, helping people recognize it's a problem is going to be a burden placed on the autistic people. Just from my experiences working with churches and talking to churches, it's going to be it's going to have to be, if the autistic people want change, it's going to have to come from the autistic people. And again, I don't expect them to walk to my side of the street. I sort of want us to meet halfway, and meet in the middle on
Right.
these types of things.
In
But
terms
yeah,
of justice, I think that would be great and appropriate. But I
yes,
hear you, and I think you're right on that it is going to require autistic people to bear that burden. And also, I feel just sadness around that and frustration because they also have borne a lot of pain that
yep,
nobody realized that we were experiencing, right? And so to ask the people who bore the pain to also bear the burden of crossing the street and staying with the conversation, that's a lot to ask. It really is.
yep,
But I see us doing it in a variety of ways, just like you talked about. And that does give me hope. I have no idea what's going to happen, what this will look like in your lifetime or my lifetime or my kids' lifetimes. Um, but I'm in the conversation and I'm not going anywhere. And I'm encouraging others to be in the conversation. And I think what you're saying is even just giving language, which you've done so well today, the amount of work you've put into assimilating all this data and then being able to just give 8 or 10 points of we move towards this, we move away from that. That I just honor all of that work of articulation. And then that allows people who've been carrying this tension inside them for maybe their whole lives to finally be able to articulate it themselves. And then as we have more conversations with one another and with non-autistic people, I think we begin to at least know what we're all dealing with, which to your cancer analogy is an important part of the process and foundational.
I mean, I'm sort of biased because my background is military intelligence, and so of course I'm going to be like, what you really need is a good understanding of the information space. That's sort of like, when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail, type of thing from my end. But I genuinely think that that's sort of the first step that we need to, and also just be clear-eyed about this. I mean, a lot of autistic people that I meet are correct when they're like, well, I've put in all this work and I've put in all this time. They should be coming to me. And it's like, yeah, they should be, but they're not going to,
Yeah.
right? It's just not going to happen. I wish it would, but we need to be realistic about what we can achieve with the resources that we have available. And unfortunately, that's sort of not going to happen. A lot of autistic people in Christianity really like liberation theology and apply liberation theology to autism and are like, we need to be liberated. And this is a great idea. This is like a beautiful picture, but maybe I'm just too pessimistic, but I'm like, at this point, I will settle for basic accommodation. Right? I will, I will settle for just having people acknowledge that I might not understand what they say on the first time. Like let's get there first. And then once we make that step, then we can go from there. But yeah.
I honor that. And I can't settle for that at this point, but I think I'm okay with that too. Like I want more for all of us. And
Yeah,
oh, go
I
ahead.
want more as well. I love the idea of liberation. It's great. But
I hear you.
I've also been in the trenches for maybe a little too long.
You've heard and you've seen so many things, and I really honor like settling for accommodations, great. And your practicality and your realistic approach, I think, is really important because sometimes you can jump in thinking we're going to change the world and we're going to do it this week, right? And then that just sets everyone up for disappointment, which stalls the whole process out, and we don't keep moving forward. So,
Yeah. Like when I was planning on publishing a book, I tried to hire a research assistant to just help me wade through all my data
uh,
and go through it because I just needed someone else who could help me with it. And so I reached out to a few universities with people who I thought would have experience and who were looking for like a summer job. And one of the things I had to ask them is how comfortable are you reading suicide notes?
yeah.
Right? And a lot of them were like, "What?" I'm like, "Well, this is the job analyzing data produced by autistic people. How comfortable are you reading suicide notes? You need to be comfortable doing this, and and you need to be comfortable seeing just misery, misery to a level you might not be ready to process." I'm perfectly ready to process that, but I'm ready to process that because basically the first 10 years of my adult life I spent deeply embroiled in a level of human misery that is very hard to describe.
Yeah.
And so I just, you know, you get to that point and I'm like, okay, I want a world in which I don't have to warn a research assistant that they need to be prepared to read suicide notes. I will take that world right now. Like that is the thing that I want to get to. And if that means I have to sacrifice the goal of liberation, so be it. Right? Like this is I'm fine with a partial solution because in many cases the situation is that bad.
Yeah.
So yeah.
John, I need to call time on this conversation, but I
Yep.
don't want to. But before we go, I just really want to say thank you for a few things specifically. One, for being willing to read the suicide notes and look at the hard truths in the eye, for being willing to listen, for being willing to ask, for being willing to stay in the conversation and not just get overwhelmed and tap out. Um, I want to say thank you for being generous. You talked about how we need a good understanding of the information space, and it's evident to me in our conversation that you have a good understanding of the information space. I know you're probably thinking of all the things that are still left to be understood, and that's
Yep.
legit. But I just want to affirm that you wrapping your own mind and heart around the information space, and then generously offering it to others is such a gift. It's been a gift to me today. I know it's a gift to our listeners. It's a gift to the people who listen to your podcast. And I just really grateful for who you are.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on the podcast, happy to share my information with other people. They're autistic people love a good chance to talk about their special interests with anyone who's willing to listen. So, I'll never turn down a captive audience.
It has been delightful, and I hope we have more conversations. And yeah, I hope we see some change, whether it's
Yeah, me
small
too.
or medium or large. I hope we see it and we could celebrate it together. Thanks for listening to this episode of Neurodivergent Faith. If you like what you heard, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing this with someone who might need to hear it too. And as you continue to wrestle with faith and identity, remember, your unique brain is a part of God's creative genius. Whether it's the way you process scripture, engage with prayer, or connect with others, you are a reflection of the vast creativity of our Creator. May you trust that God knows you, delights in you, and is working in you exactly as you are. And may you know that you are not walking this journey alone. See you next time.